I thought the most interesting place to start maybe would be just sort of the genesis of this whole idea, which I think started at the upfronts, really, where everyone was watching them. So, can you kind of go back to what your impressions were in terms of the sports marketplace and why we might want to embark on this coming out of the upfronts?
Yeah, for sure. So, obviously, sports has been a huge topic of discussion in the television space for a long time. But during the upfronts this year, it was really that was the word on every single major network or streaming services like mouths is sports, 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 sports. So, like NBC highlighted their sports offerings. Netflix ended with a Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders like show. Um, I lost track of the number of football players that just came on stage for like 3 seconds to be like, oh, by the way, the NFL is like on Fox. I saw Roger Goodell like so many times. So, yeah, that really highlighted. We knew that the sports were important because we've been seeing these insane deals for the past like um, couple of years, but that really cemented the fact that this is what advertisers are really caring about. And because that's what advertisers are caring about, that's what the rest of the networks are caring about.
Yeah, it's always, by the way, it's always so not forced and stilted when they bring out athletes at those presentations.
Yeah,
I
totally.
it's
They
always like,
very natural.
let's bring out Peyton Manning and have him throw a ball across the stage. And the amazing part, just as an aside, is that the advertisers seem to eat it up.
Yeah.
I've never understood that. I mean, you would think it's a fairly sophisticated audience, and yet, they bring out a couple of celebrity athletes, and they all go gaga over that.
I think that kind of speaks to like the average like age and demographic of like the executives and stuff in the room. It is typically like middle-aged men, honestly, like just being in those giant, theaters and auditoriums. Um, they like sports. I wish it was something more sophisticated than that, but it's just a bunch of people are like, "Oh my God, a football player." Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you talked about this being aimed heavily at advertisers, and obviously the networks are already, big on that. The streamers are now much more heavily tilted toward advertising. So I mean, because people may not really realize this, what is the allure of sports for advertisers? What does it offer them that other genres of programming don't?
Yeah. So sports, because they're live, you have an audience that has to come to you during that moment. So we're now in an age where streaming has changed the entire television landscape so that, binge watching and people watching things during their own time is a lot more common. But during a Super Bowl game, everybody has to watch that live or else, it'll be spoiled for them. And since you have all of those concentrated eyeballs, you know that your advertising dollars are going to have a lot more of an impact than they would on like, you know, throwing an ad on to like a Squid Game or something like that. That's not to disparage like Netflix's advertising strategy and its scripted content or anything. It's just like you get a ton of eyeballs right there. And as the TV landscape has become more diversified and more segmented and more fragmented, having like concentrated eyeballs has become so much more important than ever before. It's like it's kind of the only thing that's left that is like a guaranteed like money maker, honestly.
Yeah,
Um,
and the only thing that people feel compelled to watch live, which is
yeah,
the other big part of it. I mean, I'm dating myself as one of those middle-aged white guys here, but I always remember when NBC had the must-see TV Thursday night lineup, and of
yeah,
course now there's Thursday night football and all kinds of Thursday night sports, that they knew one of the appeals of that was that they could get movie studios to pay through the nose for ads on that lineup because people wanted to watch it on Thursday night. And if they were making movie decisions about that weekend, that would be a big piece of real estate for them. So if you were Warner Brothers and you had a big movie opening Friday and you were afraid it wasn't tracking well enough, you would pay a huge premium over what they normally got to buy an ad during ER, before it opened. That's the role. I mean, but nobody does that with their dramas for the most part anymore. That's the role sports plays.
Yeah, I mean, and you could just see it. We looked through some Nielsen data, and of the top 100 telecasts of 2024, this is live plus same day viewing, so big asterisk there. There's only one scripted show that like broke the top 100 telecasts, and that was the premiere of Tracker, and that only did that because it came after the Super Bowl. So those were just, additional sports viewers who were just like, oh, let's see what that is.
So there's all kinds of implications for this, for the industry, for the viewers, for consumers. But let's start with the sort of gee whiz numbers, which is the sports rights, which we looked at. What the networks are paying, network streamers, everybody, the consolidated sports rights market, which is big and based on all assessments likely to get much bigger over the next few years.
Yeah. Yeah. It's what S&P Global said it's at 29 billion, and they estimated it's going to go up to 35 billion by 2027 in just like sports rights contracts, which is like these are monopoly numbers. Like this is silliness. This is
Yeah.
so much money.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the interesting part of that is a lot of them are complaining that they're not making money on those deals, that they're
Yeah.
losing money on those deals now. So then it becomes a question of, I guess, how much do you have to spend defensively if you're ABC, ESPN, NBC, to try to keep the streamers from coming in, sucking this stuff away from you, and sort of leading to linear TV's demise that much faster.
Yeah, I think you really nailed it. It's the streamers coming in, it's the tech companies coming in that have changed the landscape. It's the same thing that we saw with scripted entertainment, where it's like they just have so much money. They can, pay obscene amounts of money to get these rights, which, means they get more consumers and more eyeballs, but that just raises the market value all around. And every league is in the business of getting as much money as humanly possible. Like we're in a capitalist society. That's just like the name of the game. But like Netflix coming in, that has kind of disrupted things. Amazon coming in with their Thursday night football package, that was huge. And now Apple has like Formula One. I think they are paying 150 million a year on that. It's completely wild. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like one thing you touched on this more and you did more of the research for this, but like how has that impacted the rights from the leagues themselves and like what they're making?
Well, the league, I mean, the NFL, as we know, dwarfs everything, and they're going to be able to renegotiate their deal if they want to before it expires. So they've got several more years on the deal, but they have an opt out in, I think, 3 years where they can test what the market will bear. And I think everyone's assuming they're going to do that, and the numbers could be in the stratosphere by that point. I mean, the problem being, of course, when you're talking about the media landscape at all right now, looking 6 months into the future feels like a long time. Trying to guess where everyone's going to be 3 years into the future is crazy. One of the things we did in putting this piece together was we looked at some of these team sales that have taken place recently, which are all commanding numbers that just are going up and up and up. The Celtics sold a few months ago for $6.1 billion, which was a record. And then as a Lakers fan, I was happy to see the Lakers one up them. The Lakers, for 10 billion a few months after that. That has to be predicated in part, and they know that the the income from these TV deals is just going up and up and up.
I have to wonder, so you've been covering this space for a while. What is your reaction like as a human to it? Because yeah, I'm bamboozled by it, and
Yeah.
I haven't been
Well,
doing it nearly as long. Yeah.
I have several. Thank you for pointing that
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Sorry.
Just cut me and count the rings.
Yeah, yeah.
No, but I have several reactions to it as that obviously, you're right. I've been doing this for a very long time. I remember when, the kind of the signature event in Fox News is imminent Fox News and Fox Broadcasting's development was Fox came in and stole NFL rights away from,
Yeah.
got into the NFL business and then stole affiliates because the TV stations in those market were so desperate to maintain their hold on the NFL. So I go back to that, the importance of the NFL has been evident for 30 plus years. But I also approach it from the perspective of a fan, which is that, as someone who occasionally goes to games and would like to know when they kick off, you don't know when games kick off anymore. I mean,
No.
everything is dictated by and set by TV. So if you're a college football fan and you have tickets for a game a week from Saturday right now, you don't know what time that game's going to kick off because they will look at the pairings and see what TV wants and then set the game times 6 days in advance or 7 days in advance to whatever will make for the best TV lineup. And that, just going back as a fan, you used to be able to buy your season tickets and plan your schedule accordingly. Now you have to plan around them. They don't plan around you.
Yeah. And also just like the breakdown of, so many different companies have so many NFL rights. Like CBS, Fox, NBC have NFL rights, ABC, of course. So if you have any sort of like broadcast package or like a Hulu with live TV or YouTube TV, you should be okay. But like Prime Video has some extras. So now you have to have Prime
Right.
Video. And then like,
Yeah, I mean, that does raise the other issue if you're a consumer and you're a big NFL fan and say, how many subscriptions do you need? How many
yeah,
streaming platforms do you have to subscribe to? I think it was one of the things that you kind of broke out a little bit was, if you want games, what is that going to cost you?
yeah, it's a really high amount of money. I think it's like something around $63 or something a month, but that's just NFL. Like
Yeah,
what if you want, I don't know, the average consumer watches a ton of things that isn't just football. Like,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, for years, ESPN was the most expensive channel on your
Yeah.
cable package by a lot, but it was still, whatever, $6, $7 a month. And you're right. Now you're talking, dozens of different outlets that you could potentially consider getting and adding up for each of them. And this gets into the law of unintended consequences, I think, too. Everybody thought, oh, we'll break up the cable bundle and I'll save money because I can subscribe to what I want. And then to try to piece it back together, people are going to end up spending more than they were spending, when they were just giving their money over to Spectrum or DirecTV or whoever it was.
Yeah. It really is like that. Bob Lynch, who's the CEO of Sponsor United, they do a bunch of like they track like sponsorship data for a lot of sporting events and teams and things like that. Um, he had one of my favorite quotes that I found during this whole series, which is just like, these companies can't afford to not overpay, basically, is what he was saying. Because the idea of being out of this game, of like just saying, like, oh, we're not going to invest in major sports, that is so detrimental in this landscape because it is one of the few things that actually still works and brings in consistent eyeballs to television. So like all of these teams know that they're overpaying, or not teams, sorry, networks know that they're overpaying, and they know that this is frustrating consumers, but they also know that if they don't do this, it's really going to hurt their bottom line. And
Yeah.
it's such a weird environment.
Well, and there's the other issue I wonder about is saturation.
Yeah.
If you're I mean, it helps with a more, and there're going to be more NFL games as part of the ESPN NFL deal. The NFL actually is in a slightly different position because, they only play a smaller, more truncated season anyways, but you're going to get more of it. But with something like the Olympics, and so far it's worked out great for them, for NBC, which is you have the flagship stuff on the main network, and then you throw hundreds of hours of programming on Peacock. And I guess if you're a really, full-throated equestrian fan, you can go watch 16 hours of that if you want to. So, you would think at a certain point it has to be, you have to start sort of choking it off, because how much time and money do people have for this? And they, the more you spend, the more you have to justify it. The more you have to justify it, the more content you have to build around it.
Yeah. And it's like a question of, okay, so the Olympics is a good example because there's so many niche sports there. I like rock climbing. I love to watch it. It was very fun to watch that. But like, how many of me are there? Like, you know, a few 100,000 maybe? Maybe the rock climbing
God, I hope not
community
that
will get,
many. Yeah.
yeah, probably not. But like, I, I was thrilled to see that. But was that worth the investment that they, put into it? Is it worth the server space? Is it worth, the production value? I don't know. How many people make broadcasting a sport, quote unquote, like worth it? It's a
Yeah.
really good question, and I don't know what the answer would be or how you'd even calculate it.
And it's actually it's harder to know, because the other thing is, taking back, you used to get the rating for the game the next day, or, a day and a half later, and you knew how many people watched it. And now when you're talking about things fragmented on streaming, and whether they report numbers or they're not reporting numbers, or using different metrics or whatever, so there's probably going to be less and less transparency about exactly how these deals are working out, over the long haul. You'll see Netflix is moving away from providing hard and fast numbers. The other streamers are in no real hurry to provide a ton of numbers about their stuff, and you're getting, I guess, these third party companies kind of guesstimating them. But it's not an exact science.
No, and then the thing we run into all the time on the television side is like, okay, Netflix self-reports numbers and they have metrics that they've come up with for what counts as a view and all those things. And then other streamers self-report their numbers, but their metrics for what counts as a view and what counts as like continuous watch time are different. All of these like things are different. So it's like you could compare Netflix ratings to Netflix ratings, but you can never compare them to Paramount Plus, to Peacock, to Tubi. Like you just don't know. And it's incredibly frustrating, I gotta say, like as someone who's just trying to figure out who's watching what.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it forces you to make guesses and assumptions
Yeah.
on coverage. So let's talk about one other aspect of this, which is the impact on Hollywood, more traditional Hollywood, which is NBC is going to give over its lineup on Tuesday nights to basketball, or there'll be Sunday basketball, all of the time that's been given to sports. And then the CW network, which we've, talked about quite a bit, and you've written about some, basically going from what was an all drama or heavily drama network, which created all those jobs, to a heavily sports network, which is relying on, acquisitions and fringe sports and things that it's picking up. So what's the impact on that? Are we seeing, despite the fact that we have all these channels, are we going to see left, and are we seeing less shelf space for scripted and unscripted shows because so much of the emphasis is on acquiring sports.
Yeah, I think that is going to be happening. We've already seen it a little bit. The Amper Analytics figured this out. The peak of spending on scripted content was in 2023. And so I gotta look at my notes for that one. It was at 46%. In the second half of 2024, that dropped to 37. So was that about 9% drop? And like there's a lot of reasons for that. Sports certainly isn't helping, but there's the WGA strike, the SAG-AFTRA strike. There was, and then a huge part is just a lot of production and a lot of investment is going abroad. Netflix is
Yeah,
spending a
yeah,
ton of money in like South Korea. It's very, very common to see streamers across the board debuting shows from like the UK or Mexico. Like it's becoming a lot more globalized, and a lot of times those shows are kind of cheaper than making something in the United States. But there's one Fox show that used to be filmed in Ireland because that was just cheaper. It's like a whole other thing. I think the Low reality show. Anyway,
yeah.
um, so yeah, it is harming scripted and unscripted spending, and it is harming those shows, I would say.
Yeah, well, and the internet, you're right. The international acquisitions is another big part of that. And by the way, I mean the other aspect of this is that the sports leagues are doing everything they can to become more global,
Yeah.
which is another area kind of ties back into that because the NBA obviously has all of these international superstars in it. The NFL is will go do a game in Mexico or go do a game in London. But I think it really favors, at least on that front, because the NFL dwarfs everything else. The NBA seems to be um, one of the better positioned leagues to be able to cash in on trying to grow globally as opposed to relying totally on what's going on in the U.S.
Yeah. I've talked to people about that, specifically the NFL's like global aspirations. And, the point everyone comes back to is it's a complicated sport. I mean, football isn't, but it is. Once you try to figure out the actual rules of football, it is kind of hard to follow. And it doesn't translate as well internationally as like the Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight was a good example of a sporting event that traveled super well because you could totally understand boxing right away. Like,
Yeah,
so
and
yeah,
had a gimmick baked into it. Yeah,
it
which
really did. Yeah.
all right. Well, so Kayla, is there one big takeaway that you came away with? We talked to a lot of people for this that you came away with from this piece that we might not have hit on yet.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the big thing, I guess I touched on it a little bit, but it is how much these tech companies and like streamers have completely shaken up the landscape. That I
Yeah.
knew that there was an impact, but it wasn't until really reporting on the series that I realized how much of an impact um, they have had. So that was the thing that was really kind of shocking. I guess maybe I know you asked for one. The other thing is like there's been a rise of smaller sports, and that's been kind of interesting. Like professional bull
Yeah.
riding has like a
Yeah.
Fox deal, a CW deal. And that's like it's to your earlier point, how much of an appetite is there for all this stuff? Mm.
Yeah.
But it is interesting to see.
Well,
What
yeah.
was
I mean,
yeah.
it is weird when you turn on ESPN on the weekend and they're covering cornhole tournaments or
Yeah.
something like that. It's really a little bit crazy, but it's all stuff I've been following. I think the thing that I've come around to though is the sense that we talk to a lot of people about whether this is a bubble, because it feels like it just can't keep going up and up and up. And I guess what I come back to over again is what are things. I had a executive say to me years ago, what is something worth? It's worth whatever the highest buyer will pay. And this was a syndication executive, but that kind of still holds. the numbers may be crazy, but ultimately it's worth whatever the highest buyer will pay.
Well, on
Okay.
that note,
And
it's
on
going to be
that
a
note,
lot more expensive.
yeah.
Thanks so much for watching our first installment in our sports series. Stay tuned for our next video where Lucas Manfredi and I are going to be discussing how these diversified sports assets are really affecting consumers.